The negotiations were over. The council chambers, an enormous circular room floating in the heart of neutral space, had finally settled into silence. Representatives from over a dozen species sat in their designated seats, their expressions a mix of satisfaction, relief, and quiet triumph. After months of talks, they had secured what they believed was a favorable peace. The war had cost too much resources, lives, reputations, and it was time to move forward. And yet, the human delegation did not look victorious. Ambassador Thawron of the XLRE watched them carefully, his silver eyes narrowing. Every species had fought hard for their demands, but the humans? They had conceded too easily. They had made no grand speeches, no desperate last-minute pleas. They had taken the terms with nothing more than a quiet nod and a tired sigh. It wasn't anger or frustration on their faces, nor resentment. It was something else. Disappointment. Thawron couldn't understand it. The humans had every reason to celebrate. They had been vastly outnumbered when the war began, forced into desperate battles against overwhelming fleets. And yet, they had survived. They had fought in ways no one else could, adapting, enduring, refusing to break. Their tenacity had become legendary. Even the council had grown wary of pushing them too far. So why did they look like this peace wasn't enough? The lead human negotiator, a grizzled man with sharp eyes that had seen too much, gathered his papers. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man shouldering an invisible weight. As he turned to leave, Thawron finally spoke. "You won," the XLRE ambassador said, tilting his head slightly. "Why do you seem dissatisfied?" The human paused. For a moment, it seemed like he wouldn't answer. Then, with a quiet chuckle, one that held no humor, he finally spoke. "You wouldn't understand," he said. "None of you would." And with that, he walked away, leaving only questions behind. As the council members murmured amongst themselves, speculating, the weight of his words settled like a heavy fog. Some dismissed it as human arrogance. Others saw it as a lingering bitterness from the war. But Thawron wasn't so sure. He had studied humans long before the war had begun. There was something in their nature, something unsettlingly different, and that thought refused to leave his mind. Hours later, deep in the archives of the Council's Central Intelligence, Thawron searched for an answer. Records of past treaties, past conflicts, past negotiations, they all told the same story. Humans never seemed satisfied with peace. Not when they won, not when they lost. Even in their history, long before they joined the galactic stage, they carried the same pattern. They never truly celebrated peace. They endured it. And as Thawron stared at the endless stream of records, a terrible realization began to take shape. One that made his blood run cold. Because if humans were disappointed with peace, it could only mean one thing. They had expected worse. Far worse. And whatever it was, it hadn't happened. Not yet. Thawron leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the endless streams of data projected before him. The records stretched back centuries, long before humanity had ever stepped onto the galactic stage. Treaties, ceasefires, negotiated settlements, every instance followed the same unsettling pattern. Humanity never seemed content with peace. Not once. It wasn't that they craved war. They fought with desperation, with everything they had, as though survival itself depended on it. And yet, when the fighting stopped, they never seemed relieved. Other species celebrated victories or mourned their losses. But humans? They only ever looked. Resigned. A cold sensation curled in Thawron's gut as he opened another classified document. The records from the last human war, before they joined the galactic community. He skimmed the pages, reading reports from their own leaders' warnings about humanity's approach to conflict. They didn't fight for dominance. They didn't fight for conquest. They fought because, to them, war was never a question of if, only when. A rustling sound broke his focus. Another council member had entered the archives, an older diplomat from the Zevran species, his deep-set eyes filled with the same unease. "You've seen it too," the Zevran muttered, his voice hushed. Thawron nodded. They expected worse. The Zevran diplomat hesitated, then lowered his voice even further. Because worse has happened before. Thorin stared. What do you mean? A pause. The older diplomat's mandibles twitched a nervous tick for his kind. I asked myself the same question after one of their first treaties, years ago. I thought it was strange, the way their generals acted. Like they weren't relieved the war was over, just waiting for something. His voice dropped lower. So I dug deeper. I found something buried in old human records. Something they don't talk about. Theron's fingers tightened against the console. Tell me. The Zevran hesitated again, glancing around the empty archive hall. It's not about their wars with us. It's about the ones they fought among themselves. The wars before the Council ever knew they existed. Theron's breath slowed. They don't talk about it because those wars weren't like the ones we fight. They weren't about territory. Not about resources. They were something else. The diplomat swallowed. I think, for humans, war is never truly over. Not because they want it, but because they know it will always return. And when it does, it's worse than anything we can imagine. Thorin exhaled slowly. The puzzle pieces were shifting, forming a picture he didn't want to see. We thought we won something today, the Zevran continued, his voice barely a whisper. We thought this piece meant the fighting was done. Thorin looked back at the records. The same pattern. The same disappointment. His throat tightened. We were wrong, he said. The lights flickered. A transmission alert flashed on the screen. A message from the human delegation. Urgent. Thorin's chest tightened as he read the first line. Thorin's pulse quickened as he read the message. It was short. Too short. Just a few lines from the human delegation, written in their direct, almost blunt style. No pleasantries. No explanations. Recall your diplomats. Do not celebrate this peace. Prepare. That was it. No further details. No context. Thorin's fingers hovered over the console, tempted to send an immediate response. But what would he even ask? They had just finished months of grueling negotiations, hammering out terms to avoid further bloodshed. The humans had accepted it. Yet now they were warning him not about a betrayal, not about hidden clauses, but about something worse. The Zevran diplomat beside him inhaled sharply, his mandibles clicking together. They knew this was coming. His voice was barely above a whisper. They knew all along. Theron's mind raced through the possibilities. A hidden military buildup? A human civil war? Some unknown faction moving in the shadows? None of it made sense. If this were a political maneuver, the humans wouldn't be this cryptic. They were cautious, yes, but they weren't manipulators. He turned back to the records. There had to be something. Some pattern. Some sign. And then he saw it. Buried in the Council's archives were hundreds of war summaries, each marked with the same classification tag, Conflict Resolution Final Terms Accepted. It was a standard designation, used across the galaxy to signal the end of hostilities. But when he filtered the data by species, something became clear. Every species had a balance, some victories, some losses, some compromises. Even the most warlike civilizations eventually settled into predictable patterns. Except for humanity. For them, every peace agreement told the same story. They fought desperately. They negotiated. They accepted terms. And then, within a few decades, another war followed. Not just any war. A worse one. A deeper, more destructive conflict. One that made the last look like a mere prelude. Thorin's throat went dry. The cycle, he murmured. It never ends. The Zevran diplomat stiffened. You think they know? Thorin clenched his jaw. Not think. They do know. He gestured to the message still flashing on his screen. They've seen it before. They've lived it. A low chime echoed through the archive chamber. Another incoming transmission, this time from his own government. He hesitated before opening it, his hands suddenly unsteady. The message was brief, but it carried the weight of something far worse than war. Unknown fleet detected outside neutral space. No known markings. Human ships already moving. Theron's stomach twisted. They weren't warning us about themselves, he breathed. The Zevran turned to him, eyes widening. Then what were they warning us about? A second alert flashed across the screen. This time, it wasn't from a government. It was a distress signal. From a human colony. And it had just gone silent. The distress signal had lasted exactly 13 seconds. Long enough for the automated warning to activate. The human colony, one of their largest in neutral space, had gone dark. No transmissions. No response. Just silence. Theron's hands tightened into fists. This wasn't an accident. Colonies didn't just stop communicating. Not human ones. The Zevran diplomat stared at the screen, his breathing shallow. What do we do? Theron exhaled slowly, forcing himself to think. We need to contact the humans. Now. He pulled up the secure diplomatic channel, his fingers moving fast. A request for urgent communication. Seconds stretched. Then a reply. A human officer appeared on the screen. His uniform was crisp, but his face told a different story, tired eyes, tense jaw, a man who already knew what Theron was about to ask. You saw the signal, the officer said flatly. Theron nodded. What happened? The officer's expression darkened. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Theron leaned forward. Try me. The officer hesitated. Then, with a quiet sigh, he activated a new feed. The image shifted grainy, unstable, but clear enough. It was footage from the colony. The first few seconds showed the settlement's main plaza, wide and open, with people going about their routines. Then the sky changed. Dark shapes, dozens at first, then hundreds, moving in unnatural silence. The camera feed glitched as the shadows descended. For a moment, the audio crackled with overlapping voices, frantic shouts, the alarm systems activating. Then nothing. The feed cut out. The officer turned back to Theron, his voice grim. They took the whole colony. The Zevran diplomat inhaled sharply. Took. The human gave a single, slow nod. No bodies. No wreckage. No escape attempts. They were just taken. A chill ran through Theron. This wasn't war. This was something else. Something worse. The officer continued, his tone edged with steel. We've seen this before. Once. A long time ago. He exhaled, eyes dark with memory. Back then, no one believed us. Theron's stomach twisted. Who are they? The officer hesitated. We don't know their name. We just call them the Return. Silence. Theron forced himself to speak. You mean they've been here before? The officer's gaze was unreadable. Not just here. His voice was quiet, almost distant. Every time we think peace will last, they come back. Every time we stop fighting, they remind us why we can't. The words settled over Theron like cold stone. The cycle wasn't just human history. It wasn't just war. It was something bigger. And this time, it had already begun. A second distress signal flashed across the screen. Another colony. Another silence. And then one final message, this time in human script. They're not just returning. They were never gone. Theron's eyes locked onto the last message, his breath caught in his throat. They were never gone. The weight of those words settled over him like a crushing force. This wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a resurgence. It was a revelation, one that changed everything. The human officer's expression remained hard, unreadable, but there was something else behind it now. Not just urgency. Not just anger. Resignation. Like he had known this moment would come, and it was only a matter of when. Theron forced himself to speak. If they were never gone, then where have they been? The officer's jaw tightened. Hiding. Waiting. Moving in the spaces between what we see. He leaned forward, his voice lower now, like he didn't want the walls to hear. Do you know why humans always seem disappointed when peace is declared? Theron stayed silent. The officer didn't blink. Because we know it's never real. We know the war we just fought was never the real one. And we know that the moment everyone lowers their weapons, he exhaled sharply, is when they come back. A cold dread crept into Theron's veins. Why didn't you warn us? We did, the officer said, his voice suddenly sharp. Every treaty, every negotiation, every time we told you to stay vigilant, you thought we were just being paranoid. His lips pressed into a thin line. We weren't. A new transmission flashed onto the console, overriding their channel. It wasn't human. It wasn't from any known species. The symbols were jagged, uneven, like something trying to mimic language rather than truly speaking it. The screen flickered, and then something appeared. Not text. Not an image. A sound. It was faint at first, like a whisper beneath static, but then it grew. A layered noise, shifting in pitch, forming something that sent a deep instinctual wrongness into Theron's mind. It wasn't speech. It wasn't a message. It was acknowledgement. They knew they were being watched. The human officer paled. Cut the feed. Theron hesitated. What is... Cut it! The screen snapped to black. The air in the room felt heavier, like something unseen had just brushed past. The Zevran diplomat's mandibles clicked nervously. That wasn't a signal, he said, voice unsteady. That was recognition. The officer nodded slowly. They know we're looking now. His eyes met Theron's. And that means they're about to move faster. Another alarm blared. Not a distress signal this time. A direct, real-time alert from the edge of known space. Unmarked ships. Dozens of them. Silent. Unscannable. Already inside Council territory. And moving straight for the core worlds. The silence that followed was worse than the alarms. The unmarked ships were inside Council space, already past the outer defenses. No warning. No declaration. They were just there. Theron's hands shook as he pulled up the latest readings. Dozens of ships. No transponders. No signals. Just a slow, deliberate movement toward the core worlds. He turned to the human officer, hoping desperately that he would have an answer. But the man was already looking past him, staring at something unseen. They don't fight like we do, the officer murmured. They don't need to. Theron swallowed hard. Then how do we stop them? The officer finally met his gaze. We don't. The weight of that single word sent a shiver through the room. The Zevran diplomat's mandibles flared in alarm. What do you mean, we don't? His voice was sharp, edged with panic. We have fleets. Armies. Defenses. The human exhaled. That's not how they work. They don't invade. They don't conquer. He gestured toward the black screen where the transmission had come through. They erase. The council chamber's lights flickered. A low hum filled the air, not from the ship, but from the very fabric of the network systems. Screens across the room glitched, their displays warping. It wasn't an attack in the traditional sense. It was something deeper. Something inside. The officer's voice dropped to a whisper. They're already here. Theron barely had time to process the words before the alarm shifted. Not a warning about the incoming ships. Something else. Something worse. A colony world had gone dark. Not destroyed. Not bombarded. Just gone. Every satellite feed, every transmission, every record of its existence in the network. As if it had never been there at all. Theron's pulse pounded in his ears. How do we fight something that isn't there? The officer clenched his jaw. We do what humans always do. The Zevran diplomat turned sharply. Which is? A new alert appeared on the screen. This time, a human one. Military orders. Entire fleets being mobilized not to defend, but to abandon certain regions. Theron's stomach dropped. You're pulling back? The officer nodded once. We don't fight wars we can't win. We burn the ground behind us. The realization hit Theron like a thunderclap. The humans had seen this before, and their response wasn't to hold the line. It was to make sure there was nothing left to take. The Zevran diplomat took a step back, horror spreading across his face. "You're sacrificing entire worlds." The officer's expression remained unreadable. "We're denying them something worse." Before Theron could respond, another message came through direct from the human fleet command. A single line of text. "They are not here to invade. They are here to collect what they left behind." And then, as if on cue, the deep space scanners picked up something new. From the human homeworld. A signal, one that didn't originate from them. It had been there the whole time. Buried. Waiting. And now, it was waking up. The signal pulsed, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat long forgotten. It had been buried deep, hidden beneath layers of history, beneath all the wars and all the peace that had come and gone. And now, it was awake. Theron felt his chest tighten as he watched the readings. Whatever this was, whatever had been left behind on Earth, it had been dormant until now. He turned to the human officer, expecting fear, shock, maybe even desperation. But the man just stood there, staring at the display with an expression Theron couldn't place. Not panic. Not even concern. Acceptance. The Zevran diplomat's voice was barely more than a whisper. What is that?" The officer exhaled, his fingers tapping against the console. "A failsafe." The words sent a chill through the room. Theron's voice came out hoarse. "You knew this would happen." The officer didn't deny it. "We always knew it could." He gestured toward the darkened screens, the silent colony worlds, the unmarked ships that had slipped past defenses like they weren't even there. "You don't fight something like this. You make sure that when it comes back, it finds something waiting." The console flickered, new data rolling in. Whatever had been sleeping on Earth wasn't just waking up. It was responding. The pulse of the signal changed, matching the rhythm of the transmission from the unmarked ships, like two halves of a conversation reconnecting after an eternity apart. And then the ships stopped. Not in the way a fleet halts movement or holds position. They froze. Mid-maneuver, mid-course correction, as if something had reached inside and locked them in place. One by one, their readings flickered, becoming unstable. Then unreadable. The Zevran diplomat took a step back. What's happening to them?" The officer's expression darkened. "The same thing that happened last time." Theron swallowed hard. "You mean, they forgot how to exist?" The ships that had been a silent, terrifying force only moments ago now flickered like mirages. Their shapes twisted, blurred, unraveling into nothingness. And then, just like that, they were gone. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Simply removed. The council chamber was dead silent. The Zevran diplomat's mandibles clicked, his voice hollow. "That's impossible." The officer finally looked away from the screen. Not impossible. He turned toward Theron, something unreadable in his gaze. Just human. Theron wanted to press for answers, but deep down, he already knew. The humans had never fought to win. They had fought to ensure that when the past came knocking, they wouldn't be the ones left vulnerable. The real war had never been between empires or species. It had always been between humanity and something older. Something that had once thought it could claim them. And now, as the silence stretched on, Theron realized the humans had just sent a message back. This time, they weren't the ones who were disappointed.